Well, hello, everybody. This is a bit of an experiment for me, so bear with me if it is not technically as seamless as it could otherwise be. It's because we've got a little bit of a weather event here. I live rurally in a beautiful part of New Zealand called the Kapiti Coast, and we've got a bit of a raging windy storm going on outside, which is playing havoc with the internet. So apologies in advance. What I think we'll do is if it gets really bad and my image keeps freezing, I've got a wonderful technical support whiz kid, Josh, who will be able to comment me that you can't see me or whatever, and we'll play a bit of video or we'll figure it out as we go along. But in the meantime, thank you for joining. I know there's some of you on YouTube, some of you are coming via Facebook, and some of you on TikTok. We've chosen this time because it's a good time in the US, it's a good time in New Zealand, it's a good time in Australia, but it's a really bad time for Europe. So we might flick the times around a little bit as if this is successful and you want more of them, so that we can include our friends in the UK. What I might start off with is just answering some of the questions that have already come in. So some of you, thank you very much indeed for sending me from advanced questions. I see other ones coming up in the chat stream. So, but here beside me on the screen, I've got Laura. Laura, apologies if I pronounce people's names wrong, whether it's Lara but I think it's Laura. You've sent me some lovely questions, Laura. So I'll start off answering those. First, you've asked me about Smithy's backstory because you love Smithy, and you say maybe I could write a whole book about Smithy. I'd love to. I don't know a lot yet about. I know some of Smithy's backstory, so it's not set in concrete yet, and so I'll be discovering it in the course of writing more about him. But what I do know in my head are little things that we've put on the web page and alluded to in other commentaries or in the show itself, is that he's a bit of a horse whisperer, a pig whisperer. He's very, very good with animals. He grew up on a pig farm. He's an orphan. So I think the village where he was raised and his little pig farm hamlet obviously underwent some trauma. It'll probably be a fire. And so he was orphaned, and so he was living wild for a little bit with the pig that we've come to know and love in the show. And he made his way to the castle sort of by accident because the king was out on a hunt, and Smithy raced out of the bushes and reared up and scared the horse, and Smithy raced after it and grabbed the horse and calmed it down with his horse whispering, and then had to argue with the knights that his pig should not be speared. His pig is not for hunting, and that's how he comes to become a member of the stable yard. He's invited there by Sir Theodore and the king, and given a bit of a wonderful welcome because he essentially, saved the king from quite a lot of trauma if he'd fallen off his horse. So that's what I know of Smithy. The rest I will discover in the course of writing more about him. So thank you for that question. Question from lots of questions from I'll come back to another one of yours in a moment, Laura. Dragonclaw, my dear friend, I've got a lot from you. Most of your questions are about the game you're making, and bless you for doing this. I'm really excited to see it. You're asking about getting the rights to use the music and various other things. All the rights around the dragon are controlled by Chorus, which is the owner of Nelvana, who are our co-production partners on it. So they look after the distribution, and that includes, all the rights, selling the rights to whether it's toy rights or collectible rights or music rights or book rights. They're the equivalent of like Disney. So if someone wanted to make a game about Frozen, they'd apply to Disney for the rights. So I'll be able to get you the contact at Chorus Nelvana that would be able to send you to the business affairs folk. Usually the rule of thumb is if you're making something that's fan-based, that you're making a game that you're just sharing with fans and for your own entertainment and the entertainment of your friends, everybody's very lenient about that and very supportive of it, as I would be. I think it's absolutely brilliant when people fall in love with a show and want to explore it in their own field. Where it gets a bit complicated is if you ever want to commercialize it. So if you ever wanted to put the game up somewhere and invite people to buy it or to play online for money and things like that, because then it comes under a commercial license, and therefore they're a lot more strict around that kind of thing because they will sell gaming licenses to other companies, and those companies will then police the fact that they've got the license. And so it's all a little bit technical and legal, and but I'll introduce you to that person. But if it's just as a fact, doing it for yourself and to share with fans, and it's not a commercial process, then people are usually very, very happy for you to go ahead and build something in that space. And I would obviously support you in doing that. So back to another question from Laura. Laura, you ask about Robert in the novel, and is he a little bit like Gunther have I deliberately made him a bit like Gunther? And the answer is yes, he's like Gunther in the sense that Jane doesn't know whether she can trust him or not. So Robert is a character who she's clearly quite attracted to. He's a good-looking bloke. He knows an awful lot about dragons. He's an outsider, so it's easier for her to feel a bit released from the court etiquette of how she talks to the friends around her. So I think she's a little bit taken in by, a bit smitten by him. She doesn't trust him. And the point we're at in the book, this last couple of chapters, is she's now really angry that she's dropped a guard. And as a result of her, she's kind of the Trojan horse who's allowed him into the castle, and she's going to be held responsible for his behavior. I won't want to give any more away than that, because of course that gives away the ending of the story. But you're right. She's going to have a very complicated relationship with Robert moving forward. He is going to be in her life, and he is going to be a difficult emotional minefield for her to navigate. I hope that answers the question on that one. And you've asked me also a lovely question: is what job do I think Jane would have now if she was a modern kid growing up? What would she do? I've actually thought a lot about that. I hope she'd be heroic. I hope she'd be honorable. I hope she bumps up. I think I'm looking up for her friend playground. Anyway, we'll go to some live questions that are coming in now. But just to finish that one off, Laura, I think she would be on the Greenpeace boat. She'd be a marine biologist working for the Rainbow Warrior, or maybe on the Sea Shepherd, saving giant whales. Okay, so some of your live questions. Hello, Kobe. The issue of how you can access the soundtrack for the show. It's the soundtrack is obviously embedded in the show, and all the music files belong to the composers. So getting the rights to those music files, if you want to get hold of them, you have to write to Chorus and specifically ask, so Chorus Entertainment rights to the music files. Um, it, it's beautiful music, isn't it? I really, really love it. It was so well made. It was a lot of contemporary music's instruments added in to the to it. So, hi, Princess Alexa. Yes, it is beautiful. I would buy it on iTunes too. Let me see if I can find out if they would put it onto iTunes and make it available. I can't see why they wouldn't. Leave that with me, and I'll chase it up. Hello, Michaela. Thank you. Yes, so Michaela's right. I don't know if other people can see the questions, so I better read them out just in case. It says, hello, Martin. Jane the Dragon was my childhood growing up, and I'm a theatre major in college. I'm interested in script writing as well as performing. What are your thoughts on a live show? Well, Michaela, I have written a live show of Jane and the Dragon. It's based on the book because I couldn't do a stage show based on the TV series. So it's because I'd need to get, like everybody else, the rights and so forth. But I've written a stage show that's more for performance in schools. Maybe I can find a way to make that available to everybody. I'd like to see it being free to schools to put on. I'm going to work with some colleagues here locally to do, if you like, a local off-Broadway version of it that we could video. But yeah, it's a live show that's a musical, essentially, of adaptation of the book. Hello, Bob, Mr. W. Miller. Nice to see you, Bob. Thanks for coming on. And you're asking, is the merchant the master behind Robert's actions? No, he's not, Bob. I don't think that's a spoiler to answer that. But no, Robert is very much outside all the court politics of the castle. He really is driven by his own desire to understand why his father was so lost his life. And as a young boy, right? Your dad's dead. Your dad's dead because of his love of dragons. What's all that about? So I think Robert is driven by a need to understand what drove his father. I don't know if, as a result of that, I will find out whether he holds dragons responsible, and therefore is he a threat to dragon? That's one of the threads that's sitting there. But yes, no, it's the merchants not central to this story, Bob. But thank you. So Kobe asked, could I speak more about Gunther's relationship with his father and what the future holds for him? You say he's easily my favorite. I always love the bits of genuine development he shows in the series. Yeah, Gunther's great, isn't he? Gunther's, I think everybody loves Gunther because he's kind of a bad boy, but he's got a really warm heart. He comes from such a dark place. His relationship with his father, as we've noted in this novel now, is very dark. I think he holds his father as a young boy. You know, he was scared of his father and had a complicated relationship. Now he's growing up. Now he's a knight, a true knight. He trained with Jane, and I think his heart's been opened by Sir Theodore and Jane and everybody, and the fact that he's been included into the court as if you like, he's a member of the family now, and so that's allowing him some separation from his father, and looking at his father and realizing what a truly selfish, toxic fellow his dad is, and he's starting to suspect that his father's wealth comes from his marriage to Gunther's mother, who was a wealthy lady. And now Gunther, I think, has got a suspicion that his dad killed his mum. He can't really bring himself to even voice that, but that lies at the heart of Gunther's complex relationship with his dad, and drives what he's doing at the moment, where he wants to bring his father's complex political shenanigans into sharp focus, and is playing this very dangerous game with Princess Lavinia, and understanding perhaps what he thinks his father's role in trying to take control of the king's purse, and eventually take control of the kingdom. I think he knows that his father wants Gunther to marry Princess Lavinia, but more than that, he's very suspicious of everything that his dad's doing. But yeah, I think, will Gunther actually take his dad down? I mean, that's a wait and see, I guess. Thank you, Princess Alexa. Yeah, will we ever learn Jester's true name? Yes, we will. He will too. We've alluded to the fact that he came there with carnival players, a troupe of performing artists, Romany gypsies, really, and they left him there because they knew that he was going to have a better life at the court and a better education. He's a very smart kid. And he catches up with his true family every time they come through. And I see part of the intrigue for Jester, which is kind of gets involved in the romance between him and Jane, is Jane's support and help for him discovering his true name. And I think he'll want Jane's help. And I actually see Gunther as somebody who's going to be part of Jester's future in a complicated way. But yes, we will learn Jester's true name in time. Sorry for these pauses. I'm waiting for the next chat question to come up. Oh, okay. As they're being fed in, I'll go to some of the offline questions. Do we know Robert's true intentions at this stage? I do. Yes, I'm not making it up as I go along. Robert's a complicated character, and I don't want to give too much away. I needed him in there because of the big story that we're getting to, the big point, which nobody's guessed, by the way, yet. Thank you all for your guesses for the ending of this book. The heart of this ending of this book is Jane discovering through the reading of the book that that the Scholar King has written and sequestered away in his sarcophagus. Those of you who are following the novel, this is the big reveal. This is what Jane desperately wants to understand before she can make a commitment to Dragon. What is that commitment? What she's signing up to? And it's big. When she discovers what it is, it's going to break her heart. It's going to break Jester's heart. It's going to break her parents' heart. It's going to change everything. And does she have the appetite for it? Or is she going to say, no, thank you, Robert, you take that mantle. I'm just going to hang out here at the court and say goodbye to Dragon. That's what it's all about. That's what the ending is. What is it that she discovers that will force her to make the most difficult decision of her life? And what will that decision be? Michaela, if you wanted to get an autograph, is there any we can use? Because I would love one on a Jane and the Dragon poster. Yeah, so look, I don't know how to do this stuff, right, Michaela? We looked at what it would be like to post things, and it looks like it's relatively cheap when it's something like a poster. I've got lots of posters I've developed that I want to start, giving away to people. So we'll do that as part of a Q&A and prizes and things. So I can sign some of these posters. I want to get Richard to sign some of them as well, and we can post them out to you, because I think I'm right in saying posters are relatively inexpensive things to send from New Zealand. So if what I think we do is, if it gets very expensive, we might ask you to cover the postage, but I'll cover the cost of the posters themselves. And what we might do is we might put up on the website some of the posters that I think look. What I've done is I've taken images from the show, and I have turned them into, like, what I think would be lithographs or wood carvings, more like wood carvings, so they feel like there's something could have been generated in Jane's day. I know they wouldn't have been, because wood carving was, um, you know, was you didn't get color, and these are color, but you'll get a sense of it. I've produced a few of these, and I think we'll put them up on the website, on the Jane the Dragon website, after this, or in the next couple of days. You can choose one of the posters, and then let's figure out how we can do it. I'm very happy to sign them, and Richard to sign them, and when I'm next in the office, and we can mail them out to you. But I think we need to make it kind of like, not competitions, but something whereby we make them a bit special. You'll obviously get one, Michaela, for asking. Erica, yeah, Erica's asking. Gunther is easily one of my favorite characters because he's misunderstood. As you said, he was influenced by his father in many ways. I can't wait to see what happens next in his journey. Thank you, Erica. Yeah, I've Gunther is interesting, isn't he? Because Gunther's what you would call, if you like, in terms of the dynamics of narrative storytelling, he's a spoiler. He's somebody who comes in and makes life difficult for your hero character, in this case, Jane. But difficult in different ways. Difficult not just because he's an obstacle that she has to overcome, because that would get boring. He's an obstacle who she has to overcome, but she also has to understand why he's behaving the way he does, because I think there's been some really good episodes, hasn't there, where they have Theodore's thrown them together to undertake duties. To what he's trying to do is get them to understand that when they're out there on the battlefield, if they're truly knights and they're truly got to watch out for each other, then it doesn't matter what the issues you might have when you're at home. You've got to really work as a team when you're out there, and he's forced that kind of awareness. And I think that's part of his journey too, Gunther's journey. And clearly Sir Theodore's seen things in him that mean that he's not just taking Gunther under his wing as a student because the merchant's paying the king for it, which is, clearly there's a financial deal gone on there. But Sir Theodore's too smart to put up with that. He would have stood up long ago against the king and said, no, come on, that's not going to work. So he does see the good side in Gunther, and really is working hard to make him the best version of himself. And I see Gunther and Jane having their journeys intertwining, even without spoiling it, if and when Jane leaves the castle, if and when Dragon's life goes on a different course. How do Gunther and Jane look after Dragon, whether they want to or they don't want to? What's Gunther's destiny? And who will he marry? Who will he? It's been really lovely over the years watching all the fan stories, and thank you to all those people who've done those beautiful artwork of Jane and Gunther's wedding dress costumes and what they look like as parents. I just have loved them all. I know I don't respond to all of them, but man, I feel so blessed to have so many of you sending in your stories and sharing your stories and sharing the artwork. So Yeah, I agree. Erica Goff is pretty good, isn't she? Um, Hi, Bob. Yes, you ask in Dragonblade, it seems as if Dragon has given up looking for others of his species, has he? No, and there are going to be stories where he's not, but in this, what I wanted to do is I wanted to um, bring the focus off Dragon's issue around this because there's so many issues. Sorry, my glasses got all wonky on my head. My, my it's quite disconcerting watching my glasses fall off to the side. Um, I wanted to move the emphasis away from a bit there being other dragons. Like when Robert takes Jane to this other place where an egg has clearly been found and opened, and it's making Jane understand one aspect of what the dragon blade's role must be, because clearly there's no parent dragon around, so the egg must have been opened by by the dragon blade. Where's the mum and dad? Where's all this about? And so I've tried to move the conversation. I've tried to. It's like a what is it? It's like a magician's trying to get you to focus on what you want them to focus on, right? So I've taken the is he the last of the dragons out of the main discussion of this book, but clearly for Dragon and it in the next book, it's uh, there's a big issue around a dragon's potential dragon awareness that there may be another dragon, which puts a lot of pressure on Dragon, a lot of pressure on Jane, a lot of pressure on everybody, um, and brings to the head what's going to happen at the end of this story. So no, he hasn't given up, Bob. Kobe, can you speak to the sexuality and gender expression of the characters we're not otherwise see in the books and in the show? I try to keep them as non-specific as I can, but so that there's freedom later on. But you've just touched on a really, really, really big moment that happens in the chapter that I'm about to um, launch, Kobe. So I won't say too much more about that. Um, it's obviously the issues of gender back in that medieval period too, and how they were discussed and how they were acknowledged and everything was very specific to the time. So I try to also get the characters to behave in period and not too contemporary, so that I try not to have them bring a contemporary attitude or understanding to some of the issues that are current at the moment. Um, and I mean, this is not just around obviously gender and sexuality, but it's also a lot around ethnicity and so forth. Because while this is a historical, it's set in medieval time. It's also clearly what in fiction we call a parallel universe, because you can see you know there's no church. Jesus has never obviously appeared in this parallel universe, or Buddha, or any of the big figures from the different faiths. So so there is no faith-based element to it, and that never arises in the books. And there's I've been very very non-specific about some of the characters because um, in medieval Europe at that time, there was a lot of coming and going of other ethnicities and so forth. And Jester is has come from, we'll find out when we find out his his name, what some of his ethnic roots that have coloured him. Same for Sir Theodore. But at the heart of it, we're dealing with a relatively medieval centric, even though it's a parallel universe, it's a medieval centric with all the attitudes and issues of the time. So I try not to um, contemporize it too much. But having said that, Kobe, you've just landed on one of the main points that comes out in this chapter. So I don't want to be a spoiler, by talking any more about that particular one. This chapter, sorry it's taken me so long to get some of these chapters. I'm so enjoying writing them. But the book was supposed to end a little while back, but there's so many threads that have opened up that I want to kind of keep building in. And you've got this ending that the story threads are coming to, but I don't want to deliver the ending till I've also nailed some of these other threads that carry on. And one of them is a really big issue around this. So, and it's really interesting for me as a writer in the current environment to make sure that I'm dealing with it, appropriately for the story, but also appropriately for the audience for whom this will be an important issue. So thanks for the question, Kobe. Hello, hey from TikTok. Favorite project you've ever worked on? It's two. I'm torn between Jane and the Dragon and the What What's. I'm wearing my What What t-shirt. There's Spotty What. They're so different, obviously, but there's something so endearing and innocent and quirky and almost you almost couldn't make a show like the What What's today. It was of its time. Some of the things that Spotty and Dotty do and get away with, and their chemistry, it probably wouldn't get away with it now. And we had enormous control. With Jane and the Dragon, there were a lot of broadcasters involved, a lot of executive producers who there were things that we couldn't do, we wanted to do that were felt a little bit inappropriate or not of the right demographic for the broadcast audience. With the What What's in preschool, you would think it would be even tougher, but we financed the show without a broadcaster on board. We financed it with our own money and some private investment money, so that we would have complete freedom. And we made 52 episodes where I was the showrunner, my son was the director, my daughter was one of the key writers with me on it. And Spotty What and Dotty were very much the chemistry of my son and daughter as they were growing up. So there were a lot of in-family jokes on it. So, and as a result, everybody sort of realized there was a really strong chemistry going on with the What What's, which there is. And it's also one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite shows. So it's between those two. Yeah, so Princess Alexa, again, yeah, you think the owner of the rights to Jane Dragon should know about the dedicated fan base, because as you say, we'd all love the posters and the merchandise. That's part of what this is all about. So let me talk about that. And the whole reason for doing these meetings and writing the novels is one of the difficulties that you face when you make something like Jane. Jane has been something I've put my heart and soul into. I wrote the books. I loved the show. I got the show up. But in getting the show up, you're borrowing millions of dollars from investors who then own the IP because it's the way it should be. They've put all that money in. Nelvana Chorus were absolutely extraordinary. They were great partners. They allowed enormous freedom in making the show. And as a result, as the distributors, they have to earn the right to get all their investment back. What happens in this industry is properties ebb and flow, right? And it's very hard for the business affairs people to focus on a property if it's not current, if it's not, up there in the top 30, 40 properties in the world. They drift off and they have to focus on what's making the money. And then that fan base, those people who love it, they start doing what it's been so beautiful is the fans have kept the show alive. And part of what I'm doing is kind of honoring that because I have been so blessed by what all of you have done and how much you've loved the show. And that's why I've come back to it now. as my life allows me some time and space to be a writer again, to write these novels for free, in order to generate a new discussion around Jane and the Dragon, feedback to the fan base to say, I'm still here, Jane's still here, it's still happening. Because what we need to do between us, and obviously I can't do this myself, this is what I'm finding so rewarding about all of you who are writing in and following this feed and sending questions and reading the book, is there's a really interesting dynamic at work in that so many of the original Jane fans are now young mothers with young children who've discovered our new shows like the What What's and the Book Hungry Bears. And they're going, oh, Martin, you're the Jane and the Dragon guy, and they joined the dots. And there's an awareness out there that everything I've done and everything Pukeko as a company have done has been really about values and not participating, if you like, in the more crass commercial end of the entertainment spectrum, but loving what we do, only doing a few shows, and staying with them and being true to their heart and soul. And that's what I want to do with Jane now. That's why I'm writing these. It's not because there's a commercial outcome. It's actually trying to make it so there's enough people go, oh, we want to see Jane the Dragon back, that it can get onto a Netflix, it can get onto a stream ring, get onto a inappropriate to mention a particular streamer. We can get onto one of the main streamers, even Disney or whatever, and be rediscovered by a new generation. But we have to do that as a social community, and so that's what I'm doing with writing these novels. I'm saying to everybody, I'm here. I still love Jane. Actually, I passionately love Jane. I want her to continue to exist. I want to understand more about her. I want to flesh out the world that I know, and and say thank you. Say thank you to all of you, because I feel really kind of lifted up by your love for Jane. It's a very genuine response to this. If that then turns into Chorus and Nelvana are able to go, oh, wow, look, we better put some more time and effort into getting new season of Jane. And I'd love to do a live action of Jane. I've started writing the script. I've developed a full pitch document for Jane as a 17-year-old. So let's see. Let us see. King Neptune. So, in case people can't see the question, I've been obsessed with the show for years and tried to do all I can to know about the lore and the work that went into the show. So, thank you for making it truly from the bottom of my heart. Well, thank you. I mean, this is a two-way relationship. I couldn't be doing this, or wouldn't have the energy to do it if everything was going into a vacuum. It's the fact that you guys write back, tell me how much you love me, give me feedback, that it's actually releasing the book a chapter at a time, both a pleasure and a challenge, because I can't change anything, right? I launch each chapter, and usually the writing process, you go back and you go, oh, I've got time to change something I did in chapter 1. I'm locking it in as I go, but I'm locking it in because I know the world of Jane from the beginning right through to when she dies, and actually afterwards. So I've got to try and I think of it. I don't mean to be arrogant. I use this just in the sense of I feel like it's Star Wars, whereby I'm sort of like a little mini version of George Lucas, who knows the whole story of it and is trying to make sure that as different things happen in different places, different stories happen, that the building blocks don't get corrupted and misdirected and misaligned. I hope that makes sense. But yes, I'm still as obsessed as you are. So thank you for that. And please, the more of you are obsessed, the better. Princess, I think Gunther's mum as a pirate or was a pirate. What a brilliant idea. Let me see if I can work that in. Because I know she was very wealthy, and that's why the merchant married her. And it would make sense, wouldn't it, for her to have a maritime backdrop for him to have met her, and would also make it difficult for her to have been able to um, keep proper records of where she got her money from, which would have made it easier for the merchant, if you like. So, what a great idea. Erica, so one of my favorite episodes is Dragon Tale. I still like seeing them work together despite their differences, and in the end have a moment of pure kindness. Yeah, me too. Erica, Dragon's Tale was written exactly for that. Um, it was one of those episodes that's got the dark, really, really dark story going on. Um, my goodness, well, dragon, you know. And then you've got the lightness. The lightness. I think Dragon's Tail is the one where he gets the pig's tail, isn't it? Or have I confused it with one of the others? When you say Dragon's Tail, I'm thinking of the one where they have to go and get the herb that's going to make him better, and they support each other. But it's very dark because if they can get it on time, Dragon's going to die. So high stakes story, if that's Dragon's Tail. Sometimes I can remember the story, but I can't remember the title. So apologies. Yeah, Kobe, can I speak more about Rake's backstory? Yeah, yes, I can a little bit, though. Again, I'm working. I keep, I try not to be. I try not to paint myself into a corner. Be able to explore Rake in more detail, but essentially, grandpa was the gardener. And Rake was always a passionate. He loved his granddad. He was passionate. He loved all the gardening stuff, and it was learning all of that. He really green fingers. Do you have that expression, green fingers? Where I think it's very English expression for when someone's good with plants. So Rake was very, very green fingered, and granddad taught him all his law. But back then, through families, so his father would have been would have become the king's gardener um, by right if he decided to stay. But he was somebody who I think we would have all really liked Rake's father. And I want to introduce him and find out more in the backstory. I want to see him come home because Rake's father buggered off. So Rake's uh, a complicated child because his father deserted him because his father wanted to go to sea and see the world, and the life of plants was too small for him, the court life. So all the skill sets passed down to Rake. So Rake's grandfather became like his default father. But Rake and I think there's one episode where Rake and Chester talk about it, but they both don't. They both would love to know more about their fathers, and same with Smithy, right? Um, so there's that whole story coming in. Yeah. Uh, Erica, yeah, backstory is a little about Sir Ivan. I had to come to the kingdom. Was he born there? Yeah, I don't know. Um, Ivan, Ivan's role when we sort of came up with all the different characters was to be this glorious buffoon, actually this drinking alpha male who's totally into weapons, who just wants to make the best crossbows, and we saw a lot of comedy in that aspect of his character, and somebody who's completely loyal to Sir Theodore, but also, if you like, could be the sergeant in arms, the one who has to that barks at Gunther and Jane and allows him to be, allows them to be a bit sort of worried and scared when we have Sir Theodore, good policeman, Sir Ivan, bad policeman, as it were. So that was the dynamic we were building into the character the family tree, as we built the characters for the knights, and how Jane would operate inside that. Um, so I never really got into his backstory, how he arrived there. You know, I think there's one piece of writing that I did whereby, he's there to pay off his bill in the tavern. Sir Theodore finds him there, and he's absolutely plastered. But a lot of these backstory elements, you can't really build into a kid show. So they're more for the adult novels moving forward. So I think there's going to be a very colourful backstory to how Sir Ivan woke up on the floor of the tavern with a massive debt that Sir Theodore's been helping him to pay off over the years, and that we will discover that he actually was a trained knight and a very, very good and honourable fellow. But I don't think he came there in order to formally join the Knights of the Court, unless there's a story thread I've forgotten. In which case, if one of you who can find that story thread, remind me. But that's probably where I'm going to go in the novels. Bob, hi Martin. Thanks. When does the next story begin, and would you consider a novel with Gunther as a central character? Yeah, I've got about 5 Jane novels I want to write. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do short stories for a lot of the other characters that, I can drop into the website, and that as such a commitment of time to do a full novel, but I've got elements that I want to find out and discover about each of the characters. So I think what I want to try and do is to try and build a whiteboard of short stories of the different, so find out more about a moment from Gunther's childhood, and I explore it better by writing it. I don't know why the brain works like that, but it helps me find the threads and the links and so forth, and to cross-pollinate ideas, because committing to writing a short story means you're committing to do a piece of real work. And I think I would avoid a big novel because it would detract me from the Jane novels. As I said, I've got several Jane novels I want to write. I've got one that's, if you like, a very early story of Jane. Then I've got some set around this era. But then I want to write some short stories set in the period of when the TV show set, when she's training to be a knight. So it's a bit like the Star Wars thing, where I want to try and put the stories on the big whiteboard where they belong, in order to flesh out different parts of the world. But yeah, I would definitely want to write. I want to write stories about all of them. And as Laura, what you were saying, Smith is one of your favorite characters. For me too, I want to know so much more about Smithy. He's such a quiet, quiet energy in the back of the stories, but such a beautiful, soft, gentle, honourable energy. And I want to see who he is. And I can only do that by exploring it. So I think it's going to be short stories initially, and then we'll figure out where it goes from there. Kobe, about having a patron for Jagger. You mean in terms of investors who might come on board and get in behind it? Yes and no. I mean, there's been some, I don't know how to say this without it being either feel arrogant or also telling other people's stories. But one of the beautiful things that's happened to me through my life is getting emails from women who've been dragged and who it's been a moral. No, it's not been a moral compass from that scene. It's just, it obviously touched them at a time they were already thinking about this stuff. So it gave them a character who could voice some of their aspirations about, how they were going to challenge the status quo or the expectations of what they were. And I've received some wonderful, very private emails over the years from people in quite senior positions, women who have been quite high up in banks or high up in government. They're now in their sort of late 20s, early 30s, who point to Jane as really being meaningful to them. Like, did you know, for instance, that Jane and the Dragon was read out on Women's Day in the Houses of Parliament of Australia many years ago? I had a request from the Australian Houses of Parliament saying, Julian Gill read out Jane and the Dragon on Women's Day. So it's been an important part in a lot of people's lives. And as a result, there are some very well-placed people out there in the world who probably would support Jane and the Dragon. Um, but let's see where that goes. Yeah, no, yeah, Gunther's mum isn't Joan of Arc, no, Erica. I've put Joan of Arc in there. I wrote Joan of Arc is a bit of a side step, right? But if I look at all the different influences on me and Jane, one is the true story of Joan of Arc, right? Like a lot of people understand, the Joan that's become the mythology of Joan of Arc. But if you read, she was one of the most written about people in her own lifetime, right? Books and books and books of her were written by the people who were invested in trying to conceal the truth or put forward their part at the politics when she was in jail waiting her trial. And then after her trial, as the different groups tried to rewrite history so their place in the history of Joan of Arc was interpreted in their favor. And so, if you go to the Joan of Arc museum and their bibliothèque in France, you can read all these books, but she is partly the inspiration of Jane. I mean, here was a girl that, those of you who don't know it, that she knew the story of Joan of Arc, the fable of Joan, of this girl who would come and unite France, because there was no real such thing as France. There were just all these separate entities that got united as France under the Dauphin because of Joan of Arc sort of telling him that he could do it and he should man up and do it. And it was just all these separate principalities. But Joan so believed that she could be this divine figure that we talked about for, I think, almost 200 years before she was born, as this figure who would come and unite France. That when she was 8 years old, I think it was 8, and her father tried to marry her off to the local baker's son in the village where she was, she took her dad to court. She took her father to court and won the right to remain a virgin because she believed she might be the fabled Joan of Arc, this coming character. And the court said, well, who are we to say that she might not be? And so she kind of organized her life so that she could be the voice for that. And all the amazing things that happened to her. In my mind, she, women had no voice then, right? But she was a very, very smart girl, and her father was a senior figure in the local village, which was the center of the hundreds of years of war, really, between the French and the English. Raided, her sister was killed and raped by one of the marauding forces. So she had very, very traumatic. But always at the kitchen tables were serving food, as all these local politicians and people were coming by, and her father was the the local person where they'd all be sitting around having the drinks. You'd hear all this whining politics from all these ineffectual men for all these years. She went, no, I'm going to change this. So and she knew the stories about the word of God coming through this girl, and that, well, why not me? And if they won't listen to a girl, but maybe they'll listen to, if they say I'm getting the instruction from God, maybe they'll pay attention. I can see this moment where she stood up on the table and said, listen, you idiots, this is how it's going to be. God has spoken to me, da, 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 da. And and then, of course, she got used. Different people came along who went, well, maybe we can use her and take her on to all the thing. And they all became more and more incredibly enamored of her skills and all the rest of it. And then she became caught up in everybody's politics and died such a difficult death. But she was a girl who lived by her principles and died by them. And she did all that by the time she was 16 years old. And then she was rotting in prison for a while and died at, I think, 17 or 18 at the stake. Um, but yeah, so I'm really moved by the Joan of Arc story, by the true story of that real girl who really existed and did unbelievable things at such a tender age, moving an entire country to believe in her and shaping that country. So no wonder France hold her to be this extraordinary figure of their past for uniting France and creating France, really. But so that's why I've brought Dark in there as uh, Jane's mother's father, John Dark, who was one of the great knights during the time of the siege. It's just a little play on my real passionate love of Joan of Arc as a historical character. Yeah, how much does Pepper actually do in a day? I know. I mean, this is the trouble, isn't it? Right, the show had to have so few characters in it, and it sort of defies belief that. So in the real world, she would have had a lot of helpers in the kitchen. So we built this concept that the castle was very poor, and so they had to let the young kids sort of move up and take control of so that we had characters of Jane's age in positions of authority around the castle. But yeah, in my mind, Pepper, I always see Pepper with her apron on. You never see her without her apron, right? Her apron's on. She's giving wise counsel to Rake and Jane and anybody who comes along. But she's busy. The poor girl is busy. I mean, she's baking. She's baking and cooking and pounding herbs. And Rake is her unpaid helper. He's in there all the time with her, as so much of the other kids. But in the show, of course, it's quite a small court, so there's not too many people to cook for. But in reality, she would have had a lot of helpers. But yeah, Pepper is. I mean, it was a pretty tough life, right? To be a young worker back then. You got up early, you worked all day, you got fed twice a day if you're lucky. You went to bed, you got up again, started all again 7 days a week. Yeah, tough. Yeah, so yeah, the sorry, I'll read it out in case some people can't see this on the feeds and that. Erica, you asked in an episode, it was mentioned the merchant pays for Gunther's training. Does this apply to Jane's parents paying for her training under Sir Theodore, or do their roles in the court pay for it? So no, yeah, Gunther pays for the training. The king was taking his money because he needed it for the royal coffers, and it falls on Sir Theodore to do that. But no, Jane won the right to learn all this because of saving the prince. So they'll think from the dragon. And so the king made this promise that Jane could train to be a knight of the guard. And and of course she does duties too. So while she's actually out on patrol and all the rest of it, so she's earning her stripes even as she's training. But her mum and dad, um, uh, they come from wealthy families. Well, not very wealthy, but reasonably wealthy court families. Turnkey, Turnkey, a name comes from a father who comes from a line of turnkeys, which used to mean jailer. So he used to be, his grandfather was the dungeon master there, and he's worked his way up to be the chamberlain. So he's got a decent living. And of course, he pays for himself out of the king's coffers because he looks after all that. So I'm sure there's some very healthy bookkeeping going on from Jane's father to make sure that Jane's duties are covered. Yeah, we never see parent. I thank you, King. King Neptune. We know we never see Pepper's parents either, and she's so young and does all the cooking on the show. Yes, she's always stressed, but always manages to keep a balance and a sense of humor. Um, what I'm trying to, you know, what when you think about how the dynamic you're setting up when you're building something that can be the landscape or the sandpit for stories, I'm trying to reproduce a kind of the same as it would be for a contemporary child. What are the forces that a young child is dealing with that make the stories feel right? They are, and I know this from a parent, right? Your parents go to school and suddenly the teacher, oh, but teacher says, so you've got the teachers, so Theodore, and having wisdom that Jane wants, that is she feels is more important wisdom than her mum and dad can bring. Oh, it's just mum and dad, right? So you've got her relationship to her mum and dad, got a relationship then to her teacher, Sir Theodore, all the rest of it. You've got her teacher, a relationship then to the court, and the court who might feel, begrudgingly that she's getting out of her status and so forth. Just think of them as the neighborhood, the families who are keeping the eye, in a village community. Kid walks outside and everybody's watching what they're doing. So the nosy neighbors and so forth. And then you've got the contemporaries, her friends, and those contemporaries are her inner circle of friends, which are Pepper and Raken, and then her outer circle, which we've just got as Gunther. And the different pressures that they bring. So you're in a circle of young friends who you can talk openly to, who will support you and all the rest of it. And in the outer circle, you've got to be a bit careful about. They might take you out in the playground or speak badly about you. And for young children at the age at which this is set, kind of 9 to 15. So it's you're discovering your identity. You're no longer just a member of the family, right? You're no longer just part of that way of understanding the world and the dynamic that you were brought up with in your family circle. You're suddenly there with your group of friends. You've got another dynamic, and you've got a group of friends who are the teachers and that. And it's a difficult time for kids because this is when, and I'm sure we all remember this, you will have a different personality for your mum and dad to your friends at school, to people you meet out on the street, who are your teachers, and you moderate that based on how you're learning your social politics. And social politics is always, how do I fit in? How do I make this work for me? What do I get out of this? How can I shape and influence things around me? And that is what I want to reproduce in the world of Jane, so that all our stories could build on those dynamics. And one of the reasons that it was important is because I wanted to show that, I'm coming back to your question around Pepper. Jane, it would have been very easy for Jane to just do things that break convention, challenge the court, do all these different things, and so what, right? The consequences for Jane are sometimes that the consequences to the other young staff. Are they going to all die? Are they all going to just feel free to do all this other stuff? She's blessed with an extraordinary freedom because she's bringing something to the castle, a dragon who can protect them all for free. So there's this huge kind of social politics going on where Jane knows that there's she's at some level being used, but she's using them. She's getting what she needs from all of this. But there are consequences on her mum and dad, on her friends. And when she pushes it too far, and they try to push it as well, or they feel aggrieved by what she's doing, she's got to navigate the chemistry of that. And so it allowed a landscape that we could tell. My glass is reflecting so badly, I'm sorry. It allowed it a landscape where I could tell really strong social stories that made sense in a contemporary setting while actually existed in a medieval setting. And that's the reason why we don't know a lot. We don't see things a lot from Pepper's point of view or understand a great deal about her backstory inside the show because there isn't really time to deal with those. Their job as characters is to deliver those pressures on Jane as her stories unfold. But of course, that's why I want to write some of these short stories, because now these characters are all completely real to me and to you, right? So, Erica, is there going to be a short story on how the god got himself out of the hole of the ground during the boar hunt? Because you were just kind of left there for a good while. Good point. Yes, like it's one of those interesting things is that you write scripts, or you write the scripts, and then the scripts are very often much longer, and you're tying up all these loose threads and all the rest of it. And then you go through and you make cuts, and something has to be left behind, and so forth. And it all makes sense when you've got the full script there. And then as the cuts come in, you forget that you've left these little things hanging. And most of the time, it doesn't matter. But you're right. There's other times where you go afterwards, you go, you left Gunther down that hole. And the assumption is you see him in the next episode, so you know it's all fine, right? I learned my lesson really early on in publishing, because I'll save this story for another time. Somebody remind me to tell you my Hansel and Gretel story, where I learned to be very careful about this stuff. I think we're going to have to. Sorry, Kirby, is there a way you can buy the original books in a way that supports you directly? Yes, there will be. I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be relaunching the book, so you'll be able to buy them on the website. But thank you for what I think sits behind that question, which is the best way that supports me directly is about spreading what we're doing now, trying to just make people aware that Jane and the Dragon exists, get them excited about it. What I want to do is I want to try and get Jane and the Dragon. This is a subject of, I want to put the Jane and the Dragon episodes onto my website in their full res, right? That's going to be an experiment. So you'll all be able to see them there. We might do that. I'll talk about it with Josh, who helps me with the stuff. Try to put one of those episodes up on my site very, very soon. See, and if you tell me where you are in the world, whether you can see it properly, whether it's streaming correctly, and all the rest of it. And then I'll find out whether I'm slapped with a restraint of trade and have to take it down. All right. But it's the same with the books. Thank you for the thought that goes behind that. I will be putting the books up there. It's not so much about the cash that comes in, it's much more about finding ways to propagate an awareness amongst the next generation of Jane and the Dragon. Dragonclaw, I hope there are more unseen animations like the teaser. No, there's other behind the scenes stuff which we're trying to convert from very old taped footage. It's mostly to do with the mocap performances and things like that. And there'll be scenes that were dropped from the show that never reached the final edit, which are only the animation stage. So, but it's really hard to dig all that material out. It sits on all kinds of crazy hard drives and back on tapes and things. But slowly we're working our way through it, and as stuff appears, we'll try and put it out there. But can you? I'm just aware of how long this has gone on for, and that the people who are helping me with this have got meals and children and all the rest of it. So I want to thank them all. Thank everybody, Josh, and the people behind the scenes who've been helping me with this. Thank you all very much who've been watching this on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook. Thank you all for the live questions, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to all of them. I want to try and do this regularly, and so let's say the same time next week. But I need to check. I've got a physio appointment, I think, sometime around this time. So I'll check with my support team, and we'll put an announcement up. It'll be about this time next week. So thank you all very much indeed. It's so lovely to have this chance. I hope it didn't buffer and freeze too much for you. And see you on more of these. Bye-bye for now. Bye.